Yes.
My
that's true.
podcast is bleeding.
This is terrible.
Delicious.
It's bad.
It
It's
is
pretty
terrible.
bad. But no one knows Lily and Jim references. That's the problem. Hey, everybody. That's the problem. Welcome to Frame Rate, the show where we rate frames. Let's go around the horn. Hey, let's go around the horn and introduce ourselves. Why not? I'm Michael Swaim.
I'm Abe Epperson.
That's the horn. Hi, I'm Cody. Johnston.
Contractually, that's his writer.
Mm-hmm.
Just
Wherever I
bits
go.
coming from left field in this one. I like it already. It's delightfully chaotic, like the
It
movie
Totally
that we
fits.
watched.
Yeah.
Like the movie.
Yeah, let's make a humorous, poetic, completely unrelated observation about something else entirely.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's such a beautiful day.
It is, and before we dive into the titular film that Abe just wove right into conversation like a magic trick, like sleight of hand before your eyes, ears, we should thank Cave, right? That's
Yeah,
who.
Cave.
Yeah.
Cave.
Shout out to
That's
Cave.
the name. That's the name of the man who gave us some money to cover this movie. And you too can be like Cave, you see. If you go to patreon.com/smallveins, one of our tiers is Pick the Flick. And if you smack some smackaroos down on that
Barrelhead?
you too can choose a movie that we cover, and you even let you pick the guest if we can. And this time we brought Cody Johnston.
He
Thanks,
had to
Cave.
do it. You walked right into it, dude.
Yeah, sorry. Sorry. Hi.
All right, this is fucking
Thanks for having
madness.
me.
God, if you haven't seen this movie and you don't understand how on tone this chaos is,
This
you're
chaos
just like,
is-
this is a fucking terrible podcast. This is just nothing.
Is this
but
your
let's,
first podcast?
yeah.
Mhm.
But
Working out
like,
the kinks.
much like Plato's Cave, it's such a beautiful day. Released in 2012 and almost completely single-handedly made by Don Hertzfeldt, a legendary animator of stick figures, is chaotic and really just a slice of madness, literally and figuratively. So let's get into it. I think it's and like Plato's Cave this is where I was going with it. It tries
Yeah,
to
I was gonna-
illuminate some of the fundamental truths of existence.
Observational
Yeah.
kind of philosophy.
And I want to start with just Don Hertzfeldt as a thing. So I can say this, but then I'm also very interested in knowing where he fits into your guys' pop culture like palette or life. But people might know Don Hertzfeldt if they know his like weird short films that, believe it or not, have been nominated for Oscars, have ranged all the way from being nominated for Oscars to being just like viral on YouTube back in the day for being really funny. And I was uniquely privileged to see most of them in theaters because my dad was such a big fan of weird animation that he would always take us to this thing called Spike and Mike's Sick and Twisted Festival of Animation, recently mentioned on a previous Small Beans podcast, where they would show just weird, fucked up, funny cartoons. And we'd go every year. And my favorite every time was like, I was always waiting to see what Don Hertzfeldt released. And if the name doesn't ring a bell, listeners, he's known for Billy's Balloon, Lily and Jim, Rejected, which was just a bunch of rejected ads.
it's probably the most popular.
That's
is
probably the most
Rejected,
known. Yeah. And then I think it's fair to say, but correct me if I'm wrong or if you guys have a different take. He like skewed more artistic, let's say, or more abstract or whatever. He got into doing things like The World of Tomorrow and more figurative and I would say are artistically ambitious rather than comedically ambitious stuff. And this is finally his feature. So it's not a long feature. It's like 65 minutes or something. But this is called It's Such a Beautiful Day, and it's finally feature length. I think it's his first feature length thing as far as I'm aware. So I have a super special place in my heart for Don Hertzfeldt. I'm obsessed with Lily and Jim, which was his first one that was just like a slice of life dating, awkward bullshit comedy. What's your guys' Don Hertzfeldt deal?
You go, Cody.
Okay. Mostly pretty limited, actually. I'm like vaguely familiar with like his voice and style. Like it's very familiar. I immediately know who it is if I see something he's made. But really the only piece that I've like seen, I'm pretty sure, is what you started the episode with, which is the balloon is too big.
Rejected. My
Video.
spoon's too big. Yeah.
Yeah. That's like I just like, you know, what was it? Literally the first day of the internet that video went up or whatever.
Right.
And so that was obviously like something I was familiar with. And then I also knew he did Simpsons couch gag.
I know.
Like,
Yeah.
Really 8 years ago or something like that. Really weird. And I remember being like, oh, it's this guy. I'll watch that. I used to like The Simpsons. And it's very weird and good. And now that I've seen this movie, it fits like really well with it.
Right.
And like from what I remember, at least of the couch gags, like, oh yeah, it's like very similar thematically and just sort of a lot of what's going on there. But that's it for me.
Yeah. I wouldn't be an asshole
Put the knife
if I
down.
didn't
Put the
disagree.
knife down.
Put the scissors down. It's a reference to the movie. All right.
I'm not super bothered by Don Hertzfeldt, but I remember when Rejected came out in like 2000 or something like that. Aaron was like a high school student.
And
right?
I was real cool guy.
and I was so fucking cool. No, it was I was like kicking it with like theater kids at the time, right? Those were the cool kids, and they fucking loved it. They fucking loved it to the point that it was just like repeating my anus is bleeding was like our hangouts.
My group
They
had that phase as well.
There was a phase, and I like arrived at like being a part of that group during that phase, and I don't know why I like stuck around those kids because I love them. They're great, but like that's such a hard thing to be like, you're not into the bit, you don't understand. Like I came over from like baseball, and like we didn't do jokes over
They're
there.
like, your
you know?
anus is bleeding. Like,
And then,
you
like,
know, come on, man.
Well, I mean, like I'd
Like
see
maybe
it.
some Anchorman quotes, but like
Yes,
not,
exactly. It was more like Austin Powers, right?
Yeah,
at that time.
Yeah, baby, it was.
That movie holds up.
Baby. But like, so to me, like it was the beginning of the long-standing like the surrealism. I'm into it, but the repetition. I am not. It's just not a joke that works on me. In fact, a great joke can be murdered, in my opinion, by just repeating things.
Oh, here
and that's
comes
what
Greasy
Rejected
Strangler,
was.
Abe. Okay.
No, not at all. Because I find that as he made a turn to the more artistic, I really liked Such a Beautiful Day. Like it's very good.
Way better than like that bullshit you're talking about. Absolutely.
Well, I mean, like some people that's what it's into, and I think that like Billy's Balloon feels like it was the precursor to every popular webcomic.
Yeah.
No, yeah. I like the image of the boy waving as he's riding his other balloon, and then
the
getting
plane coming
pancaked by an airplane. Fucking perfect. I feel like it was a precursor to every like webcomic in the 2010s, like Perry Bible Fellowship, 3-word phrase, because it was always this unexpected kind of chaos. And I think that in this movie, the balance of the mundane nonsense that he's like kind of saying, that's just like stream of consciousness that we all share, and how it's like kind of relevant sometimes, but mostly insignificant. Like that stuff is great because I don't know, he's like actually tapping into stuff that we don't notice most of the time, but sometimes go, that's weird. And I think that he's really good about, I don't know, this movie, like the word sonder came up when I was watching this movie, right?
Great word.
A few times he kind of dips into that, and I feel like that word has become like, if you're on the internet, you know it. But for those unacclimated, it's like the thought that everyone around you is having an equally interesting / complex life, and to ponder the idea of them going through the motions just as you're going through your motions. It's that feeling, right?
Very palpably felt during the scene where he has completely unmoored from his memories, doesn't know what's going on, but he stops at a gas station and there's an old man on the phone who seems very emotionally moved, who says, okay, or something like, I'll be right there. Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
And hangs up the phone and like does a little flourish and saunters off. and you're like, what was that dude's deal?
was
And
that?
that's the
Yeah,
point,
exactly.
right?
Yeah, and there's
Exactly.
like the precursor that even there, like there's that one section where he like literally he's like watching people walk and stripping them down to like their brain stems, and just sort of talking about that aspect of life, and like everybody is this sort of like cage of this experience that's unique to them, but it's all the same, but it's not.
Yeah.
Meat and physics, too terrified to recognize the sum of their parts, afraid of change, decisions, pain, stuck in traffic, listening to terrible music.
Yeah, and I love the terrible music that he does too, because it's like
It's basically
yeah.
Cody's fanfare, yeah.
Yeah,
That's right.
Yeah.
You're right. I did it like that on purpose. Yes, exactly.
He also really captures the feeling of being alone with your thoughts. Like he plays silence several times in the movie really effectively, where it's like a statement is said or a sound is heard, and then he's just like, like it's just
you sit in
just
it,
with,
kind of.
you sit in it, and then it'll move on. And I think that because sometimes it's like we love Peep Show, right? And Peep Show is all about Rolodexing all the jokes that your brain does, right? Because you're in the characters' heads, so it's like stream of consciousness, like the narrator is in this film. But rarely does it ever do the thing where we all do, where we have a bunch of thoughts, we have these stupid thoughts, we dismiss them, sometimes we laugh at ourselves, and all that's the whole myriad of things that our brains do. But sometimes our brains just are still, and we don't think a goddamn thing. And that's something that in like terms of like stream of consciousness literature, you don't see a lot, that Don Hertzfeldt does really well, I think.
Yeah.
Not me, baby.
you can't stop. Michael Swaim can't stop.
Never still. I'm working on it. But yes, I get in theory what you're talking about.
Like Serenity, baby.
Yeah. Just to recap and transition into something that I'm sorry, not recap, but synopsize very quickly and transition into something I really appreciate about the film that will come out of that naturally is if you haven't seen it, or you don't know what we're talking about, Abe's alluding to the fact that I would describe it as almost, if the goal wasn't to be funny, an animated anthology of like weekly comic strips. It's like he did 100 Calvin and Hobbes in a row, and they do have an overarching narrative, but it's these little vignettes. They're almost exclusively narrated either by a narrator or by Bill himself, who's the main character, who's sort of an everyman stick figure, and it becomes evident over the course of it that Bill has severe mental illness, and something and yet through his journey also uncovers a set of like universal truths. And I compare it to like Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is like, there's some stuff that's just true, or like Vonnegut's canon also does this. And a lot of talented people take really beautiful stabs at just, here's like 5 or 6 things that I've discovered that is hard-won wisdom that is true. And we remind ourselves of those things by, enshrining them in stories. And this feels like Don Hertzfeldt's take on some big truths that I'm sure we'll explicitly get into. But like one of them that was really interesting to me, and talk about Sonder, was inviting you to imagine someone with actual aphasia and how disorienting and unmooring it is, and what it means philosophically to actually have like, because Bill gets face blindness, the thing where people seem like imposters, a complete loss of understanding of his identity at certain points after like surgeries, and what that would actually be like, and how you would actually live, and what you would be thinking in your head. Like Don Hertzfeldt goes as far as to imagine what someone having a really severe disconnect with reality, what they would think on a moment-to-moment basis, and he does a really compelling job. I can't say whether it's true to life, but it's compelling. It feels like really interesting.
Yeah.
But it is entirely, or that's not true. A couple people say things, but it's basically a long monologue. And that's what I wanted to ask is like, and we'll get into the ending, I guess, a bit later, but did you like it, dislike it, or were neutral about the fact that this is essentially just a flip book of stick figures and a vocal track? Did that ever get boring or tedious, or was that fine for everyone?
I didn't find it boring or tedious. I mean, well, the runtime I think helps because it is only like 60 minutes, But it was all, and aside from the fact that you can look at his, other works and go, oh, this is his style. He does stick figures and stuff. But it was utilized in a way that brought out what was being discussed and the themes and what he was trying to talk about too. And like it highlighted the experience in a way that I think was compelling the whole time. You have these little, it's not until the end. It's not really a full screen movie. Like there are these little like windows, these little snippets that you see. Most of the screen is still filled with black.
It's amorphous framing. Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, and like there's some jittery editing and stuff for like these certain moments and experiences, but it is like you're kind of looking through like a keyhole or like a hole in the wall into these moments of this person's life, and there's a simplicity to it that I think also lends itself to like being able to explore the ideas that he's exploring in it. So I never found it not compelling or interesting to watch, because it was like quote unquote simple. I think it was an interesting way to do that, because like you said, like very few people ever actually talk. There's like, I think the doctor at one point speaks. You hear the doctor's voice, and that's like at a critical moment in the movie, in the story. But you are sort of in this one person, and it's sort of a slow burn that I really appreciated.
Yeah, I agree entirely. I think it's well said, and it's also like it gives him the ability to, which was always true about Rejected, because there's like Rejected he always came from this place, Don Hertzfeldt that is, came from this place where it's like everything is throwaway. At one point, like a hole is ripped in the canvas, I believe, in Rejected, or maybe that's Billy's balloon. Like the paper itself becomes crumpled.
That's Rejected.
I think that's
when he did all the
Rejected,
crumpled
yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, like so he really wants to fuck with the medium, which is really cool, because he has a piece of technology he did have a piece of technology that was like, it's a 35 millimeter camera, but it's an animation setup called a Rostrom's animation setup, and it was built in the 70s, and it's what makes Hertzfeldt movies, and it's one of the last surviving cameras of its kind and still operating worldwide. Although towards the end of the production, the camera started to give. That's why you notice so many light leaks in like the last third of the movie, because the camera's motor began
interesting.
to fail.
I kind of thought that was kind of on purpose.
Which
And
is
it's all-
no.
It's a movie about accepting decay and forgetting.
It's
and
accepting.
Yeah.
I think he probably was like, I'll take care of this after, and
It's
maybe he's
poetically
fixed it,
appropriate.
but I don't
That's very
know.
appropriate. That's
But
cool.
what it does is it's an animation stand, so it allows you to have like hand-drawn animation. You can do weird optical effects by just putting shit in front of the lens. You can do trick photography by doing mats, which is essentially what is the vignette form that you're alluding to. And all that stuff, you can do it frame by frame. And so he has this ability to really muscle his vision into the format itself. And I think that doing that is so perfectly suited for a movie where like the mind is being lost, He does so many cool things where it's like the light bleeds, like we mentioned, the little vignette, like keyhole stuff that you're talking about. Also, he does like some, like, this is a deep cut in terms of animation, stand brackage, where he's like literally painting on the frame. So he is all over the place, and I love it.
And
because
he starts
just
the
throwing
film
everything
with an upshot of clouds over stars. That's like stop motion, flip book, real photography. Which in retrospect becomes incredibly fraught with meaning, when one of the only positive moments in Bill's journey is this moment where he finally feels at rest and connected with, like, whatever you want to call it, able to access wonder and happiness, and looks up at the stars and muses about how it's a giant time machine, a giant magic time machine in the sky every single night. And he can't believe that he never looked at it that way before. Doesn't spend every night just staring at it, and goes around wanting to tell people, don't you realize everything's amazing? And it makes that shot from the beginning, Cody, so dope. Yeah, I'm so pleased. I thought I had too much nostalgia, or that I'm so pleased you guys both like it as much because I really think it's great. I was actually worried for the first third that it was going to be a nonstop, disconnected, like Gary Shandling in his later years would go and do stand-up with nothing planned and just talk. And I did feel like it was that for a while, where I was like, is this just a statement about being awash in these weird, mundane moments?
Yeah.
So the first, I'm like medium compelled by the first third, but when it becomes a story and you realize, oh no, he's hearing voices because he's hearing voices, and it coalesces into a coherent thing, exploration of very deep themes, I think it's phenomenal. Like, it's such a staggering thing to me that it reminds me of shit like, and it's not that sophisticated, but man, it's effective because you've been awash, right, in stick figures the whole time. And there's that moment where Bill, he seems to get some kind of brain surgery, and wakes up, and the doctor explains his situation to him, but his memory's so far gone that it says he doesn't understand what the doctor's saying. And then they go like, can you tell me who this is? Do you remember her? And they show him a picture of his on again, off again girlfriend, and it cuts to real footage, which you realize is a POV from Bill waking up in bed next to a woman. And it's the only real footage you've seen other than like this shot of a pig that's used for half a second. It really reminded me of Waltz with Bashir, which we covered, where you suddenly get real footage at the end. And man, the emotional punch of that one shot of real footage after all the stick figure shit. Super, super effective. So I wanted to ask, based on that, they around the same point, they start to explain that it's possible with people who have memory gaps that they start filling it in with false memories. My question to y'all is, do you think the implication is that all the stories about his family, like it's explicitly implied that the story about his little brother with the aluminum arms and legs is a false memory? Right. And which makes it nonetheless beautiful, which is an interesting philosophical point. But do you think all of his, like, is his entire story of the family history and the hereditary nature of his mental illness, is that all in his head? Or is it impossible to suss that out?
I think it's impossible.
I was going to say, I think it's impossible to fully answer that question. It's a good question, but I just don't think, I think it's by design kind of both, right? Adding that doubt by like you're saying explicitly, like this is like a false memory, but there are, I don't know, it's hard to suss out.
I think that there's a lot of times in fiction, and I think he's doing a similar thing, is that it's kind of what you're implying almost with the question, Michael, where it's like it's both things. Like, for example, his grandmother's little sister Polly died of contracting yellow fever and catching on fire.
Right.
I think that, so what I think it does is I think that there's probably some truth to it. It's like they probably died of some sickness, or something like that. Could have even been yellow fever. But the details of catching on fire is like it makes it available for like to Rolodex jokes.
Yeah, same thing with the train, right? Like
the train
and then got hit by a train,
back,
cut in half by a train. All these sort of like mixing and matching and trying to make sense of a bunch of little pieces that some are real, some are you, some are not. I was talking about like the atoms, how we're all we're not made of the same atoms we were 10 years ago or whatever, so you're sort of cobbling together the semblance of a self, and I think it is a mix and match sort of situation with that.
Yeah, he does. He basically enshrines a number of thought experiments that I have encountered before, but he has very good taste in what thought experiments are actually truly profound. I've heard that thing about the cells before, and he makes a lot out of or there's little moments that sort of shout, you can't tell the good news from the bad news until it's too late, and that's the true chaos of life, and that's why accepting and letting go is kind of the only strategy you can eventually employ. Vonnegut already said that, but it's still good to say, you know what I mean? Yeah. It's like a good curation of things that I believe in, and they really resonate for me. I do want to say, just while we're on that passage about his family, I had to write this down because it's one of the only, I don't think he's trying to be funny very often, but this passage slayed me, and if listeners are on the fence, I think this will like if you think this is funny, you should watch this movie. His grandma was born in Boot Black 2 years after the great mud storm killed all the hogs. Grandpa was a rancher who once strangled a rock in a fit of religious fervor. He was a simple man, eating an onion when a train cut him in half. Her older brother grew his mole hairs long to purify his soul, and once fathered an illegitimate child he strangled in the barn at night. He claimed he saw an aquatic creature make off with the mayor's prize cow. He soon became plagued with firebugs, lead poisoning, and polio, and was eventually killed by a train. Which I gotta say reminded me of nothing so much as Scott Bug introduction.
Yeah. It's a little bit of Akewood too.
A little all over the place, but still coherent somehow. And yeah,
exactly.
Not trying to be funny, but taking jokes if jokes are present themselves.
Right.
I wrote compared to Akewood on my notes as well. Definitely gives Akewood vibes at certain points, and reminded me. I also wrote reminds me of Synecdoche, New York at another point, and it's crazy to me because it's just fucking stick figures. That is an accomplishment
because
in
it's
and
the
of itself.
Thoughts. It's
what it signifies. Yeah,
the Synecdoche also is fervidly interested in the mundane to the point of like trying to search for meaning in the mundane, which is what this movie does as well.
And finding
with Akewood,
because there is meaning in the mundane.
The phraseology is just like, and joke Rolodex seems like it's very Akewood. Yeah. Speaking of jokes, I have a question for you because the trains also got me right. And I mentioned the little sister Polly dying of contracting yellow fever and catching on fire. I typically don't like that type of joke. And it's the same thing with my anus is bleeding over and over and over. This movie isn't my anus is bleeding over and over, but I can't determine how, and I love the train joke. So I don't know how one is good and the other isn't. Like, why is catching on fire? Like, it bothers me a little bit personally. Like seems like a cheap reach or like a low-hanging fruit joke, but the train joke is like really good to me. Maybe because it unexpectedly is done a second time.
Yeah, it's the repetition is really like deliberate and meaningful, and purposeful. And there's time in between too, right?
There's
it's
time
not
in
just
between.
like, all right, I get it, the phrase, you're saying it, it's a funny voice, we're doing that. As opposed to the surprise of like, oh god, oh, the train again. All right.
It's kind of, and like how Mike read it just now, it's kind of a perfect joke. And later in the movie, his own mother dies of, several things, but also a train. And that's, I think, for rule of thirds. Sometimes I hate the rule of thirds. Do you guys know what I mean by that? As
by
like
hating it, or what the rule of thirds is? Yeah.
No, I know what the rule of thirds is. I'm just saying, like, what?
Oh,
like,
I know.
Do you know?
I
are you ever
know.
bothered by like a third?
Sometimes,
joke?
yeah. Or the contrarian in me is like, why not? Or sometimes you can write it. The thing that it becomes a system in and of itself, and comedy is all about breaking systems. So it makes you want to do 2 or 4 because
you expect 3,
right? But then it's just the pendulum swings back and forth.
I guess in jokes that I didn't expect a second, like in systems where I didn't expect them to be built, I'm like, that's nice. I like that you played with my expectation. And then if you make it a rule of third, I'm like, back to you made it mundane again.
That's my favorite maneuver, which is what Arrested Development did so well, which is you make something both beat one of a joke and double duty as an actual plot point,
that's right.
A plot turn. So the audience is experiencing it as a plot turn and totally not expecting that it's beat one of a 3-beat joke.
Right.
And when it comes back, you go, I didn't know that was going to come back. Like it slips past your radar.
And it gives you a new thing to focus on. That's very smart because
very good.
Tight little packages.
But that is what reminded me of Synecdoche, by the way, is when they say his mother gets hit by a train and then due to a clerical error, she's buried between a coffin full of rocks and someone's dead dog. Like it's as pathetic as possible. Very Charlie Kaufman.
Very Charlie Kaufman, that's for sure.
Yeah. And I gotta say, I'm like dragging us down recommendation road. That he has a realization by going through his dead mom's old photos that she got a doctor's letter strongly suggesting that she never have children because they would probably be mentally ill, which is of course a weird, emotionally fraught scene. And really reminds me of a comic that I'm just taking the excuse to recommend that I think everyone should read in their lives, called Jimmy Corrigan, the Smartest Kid on Earth by Chris Ware, which also has a parent abandoning a child in a very good way, and also is basically stick figures, but fancier stick figures. Really good.
Well, this movie is just so good. It's so good at these moments that are really strongly connected to other moments, and coming back to them. Like that, even just that one scene you just mentioned. There's also something later where it's a bunch of things. It's also this mundane sort of like conversation with his coworker, but also his coworker bringing up those twins, right? That both became serial killers.
Right.
And it's like, oh yeah, genetics and stuff. And like it is linked to these other scenes and like what this character is going through internally, but it also is just like, yeah, how like you're at work and like a coworker's just like telling you stuff that like you're not really like caring about or paying attention to. Yeah.
Right.
God, I love when in the hospital when his uncle says, yeah, people never say how they really feel until it's too late. Then he stood there silently and said nothing at all.
So good. And then just like disappears. They take the flowers away, like all this stuff. Yeah.
Oh yeah, the doctor says he's getting better, so his mother removed all the flowers from his room. Yeah. Oh my God, the fact that the guy in the bed next to him can't speak and only has a button he can press that makes a robot voice say, I am in pain.
I am in pain.
Like
God.
All day he just hears a guy say, I am in pain.
Yeah.
And it becomes such a philosophical existentialist. It reminds me of reading The Stranger in college. Like it is truly existentialist in its
And I like how
thought.
they bring it up after you've forgotten about it after a while. He's very good at that. Like keeping... like waiting for the repetition, because you get the I am in pain and you like think about that, and then a bunch more of the story happens, and like he and his ex-girlfriend are like enjoying some time at his hospital bed, and just right in the middle of a line of narration you just hear a distant I am in pain. It just has nothing to do with there's one of my favorite, talking about just what Cody was just talking about with the mundane stuff. An old man who smelled like gasoline held up an onion and then murmured to himself, "Big onion."
Big onion. Yeah.
Bill looked down at his socks. Yeah.
And he smiles at Bill, and then Bill looks down. Yeah.
The first like 5 minutes are so good. In that way of just like the perfect interaction that could have happened to literally anybody. And then
it starts
almost
off,
David Sedaris like mundane.
Yeah, just like
moments.
Yeah, just like he said like how's up or something like that.
That's the first like vignette.
It's so good.
Like, the disconnect. Between
very
two
peep
people
show like
by.
Actually, that's totally on point too. And
how's up? And these
big onion.
Yeah, big onion. I love that one just because it's like I could see myself in both of those.
Yeah, you're either one.
Roles.
Exactly. That's
yeah. I think that's what he's connecting to that's where the sonder comes from, the comedy, because it's like I'm going to make circumstances that you apply yourselves to all members of all parties involved.
That first interaction where like they're like how's up way, and like it's just like weird, like they cross paths, they never he like literally says they never see each other again and don't think about it beyond the next day. They just never think about it again. And Bill like watching it, Bill could be either one.
But then fucking later in the movie, when he's had a complete mental break, they do the exact same sequence, but this time the context is he's talking to his father, who he hasn't seen in decades, who is also mentally ill and senile. And the same shit happens where they go, This was the last time they'd
night.
ever see each other in their lives, and neither of them fully understood what was going on. But just going with his instinct, Bill stood and said, "I forgive you." And the old man doesn't know what he's referring to, but cries anyway. And they never think about it ever again. And you're like, oh my God, now this thing that was mundane means everything. Like it has so much emotional charge.
And the thing that they wanted to happen did occur, but it didn't have the same meaning to them that as if they were totally aware. Yet it did.
It did
because
still, exactly.
They went through the motions, you know, like they actually did the thing.
Yeah, drove there, had the
experienced
conversation,
stuff.
Yeah,
Cried.
It's almost, like did all the steps,
did all of the processes, felt it. Yeah, and I think that there's an argument to be made, or I think he's kind of making the argument that there's your ability to go through like a genuine human moment is not necessarily dictated by your ability to want that moment to occur, but rather that you just are participant in the moment. You know, like I think that that's the lesson of Bill, and that's also why we don't want him to die at the end, is that it's like we don't want to participate in his death, but we all kind of have to,
right?
You know, like that's the time moves on. He does that whole point like where he does time zero. He basically says like that's the one continuous spectrum that we have, and he draws an arrow at the top of the screen.
It's Tralfamadorians. It's
yeah, exactly.
What's a little joke he said? He's like, it's like, yeah, I feel like I somebody told me that before. But I don't remember.
And the guy doesn't
get it. Yeah.
Which is perfect because that's so true about every, like, I'm sure people had that when I like opened up in this podcast with Sonder. People were like, yeah, I know.
Yeah. So my interpretation of that ending, which I dearly love, it's like the way my brain wants to go anyway with this. And it reminds me of something Vonnegut talked about where he says, fearing death and having that intrinsic fear of how long you'll be dead and how long eternity is and how life is just a fraction of a second feels overwhelming sometimes. But then on the other hand, something that is true that you don't think about enough is he makes some reference to like, I had a nice day going fishing with my brother, on this particular day in July when we were kids, this shit happened and we watched the trains or whatever. And he goes, and no matter how long the universe persists, even after all time stops, it will always have happened. Like that did happen. It doesn't matter if it's forgotten or that everything decays into nothing. Stuff that happens still happen and will have always happened eternally. Like that also spreads eternally. And I feel like in this we get kind of the more depressive view of that phenomenon, but it's still super powerful, which is that, in my opinion, after he goes to the old folks' home and then drives all night and then pulls his car over and lies down in the grass, I think Bill dies. That's my interpretation.
Right.
But the narrator is basically going, okay, but let's say you got what you wanted always. Like, because, as he says in Synecdoche, New York, here we all are alive for a tiny moment, all gonna die, knowing we will die, but pretending or sometimes that we won't, or secretly thinking we won't. And it's like the narrator,
we're hoping that we never do, right? Like,
right.
And
I remember thinking as a kid, I'm sure by the time I die, they'll be able to upload consciousnesses to data or whatever. Like I thought shit like that all the time.
I can smoke cigarettes for as much as I want. They'll cure everything.
Yeah. And this ending where the narrator says, let's say he didn't die, right? It's like an argument with yourself. Okay, let's say you get what you want. You live forever and ever and ever. And the whole ending segment of this film is a thought experiment where Bill lives forever. And it's like, let's say it's good too. Like, let's say he doesn't get bored. He says he can't ever die. People die around him, but he finds new loves. He always finds it rewarding. He learns every language, travels every land, does every job, learns to control all pain through meditation, becomes basically the Buddha, creates great art, loves, loses, loves again, and is fulfilled like at all times. And everyone dies and the planet's engulfed by flame and he floats through space and he's fine with just looking at the stars, and then all the stars die out and he's alone. And you know what happens at that point? And I think this is a phenomenally interesting concept. To quote it, or like, what is the quote? He forgets his name and the place he once came from. He lives and he lives until all the lights go out. And it's the implication that if you experience everything, if you live forever, if you have the totality of memory and knowledge and everything you want is fulfilled, everything is an undifferentiable goo of nothing. And it's like, I know people always say, well, life wouldn't be as precious if you didn't die. And I always go, yeah, that sounds true. But in my heart, I go, that's not true. I would want to live forever. This is one of the only thought experiments that's palpably driven it home to me where I'm like, actually, he's right. I wouldn't want to live forever. Everything would lose its meaning if everything was anything, and everything's everything.
Yeah, everything's everything. Nothing's unique. It's all just, in your little tank.
It really made me feel in my bones, oh, okay, death does render life. And ultimately, when they show his deathbed scene, I find it a really hopeful sentiment when he says, on his actual deathbed, all that occurs to him is how stupid it is, how much time he wasted in his life thinking about this moment.
This awkward moment,
is, and it's just awkward, and it's going to be over soon, and it's just a moment in his life. Why did he focus on it so much? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then he says he wants to tell everyone around him this unfathomable wisdom, but all his brain can say is it smells like dust and moonlight.
It's like dust and moonlight. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
what a good fucking
So
moment.
good. Yeah. Full of it. It's full of them.
There's a precursor to the ending where we actually get a vignette where this kind of all happens to him in a small microcosm, like a fish tank of version of it, because there's a section about him not dying and like his family going through the motions of grieving, right? Like they buy flowers and then they get the news that he's not going to die. So they take the flowers out and like his uncle is a little bit, you sent the coffin back and the uncle's a little like disappointed. And I love this perception or this thought of not dying being an inconvenience to those we love,
right?
Who have already started to grieve, because grieving is such a, it's such a, like, downhill, or not downhill, but like it feels like coming off a slope, right? Once you build that momentum, it's like you want to finish the grieving process because we need things to end. And when things don't end in the way, when there's that awkward kind of ending, it gives us like a sour taste because we want our things to be all buttoned up and perfect and exactly the archetype that we wish. And I think that he's really playing with the expectation of you perceiving what you think is the right way for things to go and the reality of the chaotic kind of awkwardness of life being so disconnected that you might as well not even try to build yourself into an archetype. That is actually, to me, true wisdom. And it's very well said in both the ending and like the precursor to the ending, which to me is like, he's kind of telling us, think about how it's like he says in the ending, like, think about how good it would be if this were all to occur. And in the like kind of like 2/3 part through the movie, he's kind of saying like, isn't it awkward that we do this to ourselves? He's kind of hitting it from both sides, and I think that that's excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Damned if you do, damned if you don't.
I mean, yeah.
Well, and both contradictory things are true is a repeated theme.
Like,
yeah.
So unnecessarily reductive. I don't know why I chose to speak then.
No, I really like it.
Yeah.
It's true though, silence.
Or at least
you needed to fill the silence because you're a joker.
I mean, I'm meeting you more than halfway here, but there is something about contradictory truths, right? Like his mom is, or at least in some way, heredity is to blame for the mental illness that he's saddled with and the fact that it makes the back half of his life difficult and sad. But also there's the reveal that his mom practiced writing the "I'm so proud of you" note hundreds of times every day. So it's like, she loved you so much and she completely fucked up your life. It's both.
Yeah, she tried really hard to not make it that miserable, and that difficult. Yeah.
Right. Which is, it feels so wise to me, especially when you couple that with shit like, because the benefit of it being abstract stick figures and using so much ellipsing and just cutting, like I say, to the point where it feels like disconnected comic strips, but then they are connected in the aggregate, is that he can, like, oh man, it blew my mind when I realized Simpsons had this magic ability. Like, you got to know the cast of Springfield so well that they could have someone say the setup for a joke and then cut to Bumblebee Man across town, even though he hasn't been in the episode, and he can say the punchline. Like, they could disjoint from time and place. And I realized that at some point, Springfield is just a hive mind. Like, anyone can riff with anyone at any time. And I feel like this has
an expression of, and
the unmooring in time makes it equally, this exploits that same thing, but for dramatic effect so well.
Right. Have you ever read Heartbreaking Work of Staggering Genius? That was the first time I ever arrived in that, where he's dealing with the fact that he has to raise his brother because his parents died, and he's like thinking it all through, and he's in all of his insecurities, and he's in traffic in his car, and he looks to his left and he sees like a motorcyclist who takes off his helmet or something like that and looks at him and is like, you're totally right about like every single one of those things you just said in your mind. And it's like he's having a conversation with a stranger who's judging him and adding on to his kind of like litany of self-esteem issues and insecurities. And it's just like some pulling from the chorus, the idea that there's two thoughts, right? There's the thought that we're all we share some kind of collective unconscious and like some joint wisdom, all of us, all humanity. And then there's this other thought about like sometimes things don't work, or the human animal is broken, or, like life is kind of an awkward, bumpy kind of ride. And then when you join them together and you give like the awareness of both of those things to all characters, it becomes like very interesting in a way. It just reminds me a lot of that.
Yeah. And it allows for something that I've often thought this myself as like a mental challenge. I've always tried to, and like, I've never figured out how to break this, but I'm coming to realize dimly that I think this movie might be the movie I'm describing in my head, which is, I've thought, what would a movie be like if you took someone's life and all the moments that have meaning attached to them, right? Like, oh, this sequence in your life means this, or could have this meaning attached to it if it were a scene in a film. And you chopped them all up and made them undifferentiated dots, and you put them back in order for the purposes of making a film. But rather than doing it in the order of chronology or structure or anything like that, you did it in the order of an essay. Like, you were composing thought by thought what you wanted. And I feel like this movie is that, because it does this dissociative stuff where like he is in the present talking about or experiencing the fact that his mom, wrote the note hundreds of times, and then it'll cut back to him as a little child and say stuff like, someone at the beach told him that the waves had been there since long before he was born and will still be there long after he's gone. Bill looked out at the water and thought of all the wonderful things he would do with his life. It's just like, that is both childhood and the disappointment of growing into adulthood in one moment. And I really do feel like, I guess what I'm just describing is like full dissociation. Like Finnegan's Wake almost is this, or Ulysses almost is this. Ulysses, but you get so much out of true stream of consciousness in a way that I think sometimes I'm scared to indulge in, because I'm so comforted by the story having like a shape that I recognize.
Right.
And true stream of consciousness almost feels like it's shapeless, but it sure is dense with like good shit. So
and I feel like this is like, I agree with you. I think you're right that it tends to be like that, but I feel like this kind of bucks that, because it's not shapeless. Like it kind of feels shapeless as you're watching it, but as it progresses, it doesn't feel like that. It does very clearly like, oh, this is part one. Then it does this. Then it goes through this. It's just sort of the presentation, the thoughts that we're going through can apply to so many different moments of your life, can apply to so many different people, everybody really, that it feels formless, but it's actually not.
Yeah, and yet if it were live action, I
Yeah.
really do think you'd have a problem with like the location completely changes every
Mhm.
30 seconds. All the characters, it would have a cast of hundreds because he just meets random strangers constantly
right.
with no context. I feel like it would feel really disjointed. It's almost perfect as stick figures.
Because it
It's
is,
like,
yeah,
it's
exactly.
really
It
Don
has this-
Hertzfeld's
it-
magnum opus.
Yeah, it creates this sort of connective tissue that keeps the form together, even though it seems counterintuitive because they are stick figures. It seems even more formless than like real people acting it out. But because they are, it sort of keeps it tight together.
Reminds me of a comic called Hyperbole and a Half that's also quite good about mental health challenges, and Far Side, where it's the fact that in Far Side, it always felt like the universe was somehow connected and all these
disconnected.
dumpy dudes and cows and shit probably know each other,
Yeah,
even though they
yeah.
were technically all unrelated, different strips.
Oh,
You'd always be like,
everyone was
Far
different.
Side is...
And every joke
Yeah.
itself is about a fundamental disconnect about the interconnectedness of everything, right? It's always like the cows have an expectation of how something should go, but in the end, they're just fucking cows or something like that.
Yeah,
It's always that that turn. It reminds the things that I thought of actually. What I wrote down while we're doing like reference, reference time. The one, at least like the first like half of the movie, gave me a vibe of that Emma Thompson and fucking Will Ferrell, Stranger Than Fiction.
Oh,
Have you seen that movie?
I like that movie, yeah.
Yeah, that movie's good because she narrates his life, and you get the same kind of like spastic, like mundane thoughts that he'll respond to, and he's like, "Oh, really? Are you? Am I really that boring? I know I'm just brushing my teeth, but do you have to make me sound like that?" The other one is like The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, which I like a little less, just because it's a little bit more, like Wanderlust, but it's the same kind of idea about someone almost like using mundane examples of like, my life is this, it's so boring, and I just like, it's so ordered, and then I want something more, just by saying like how mundane it is, like never actually coming out and saying I need to go somewhere, I need to fix this. It's just like, I'm unhappy with what I see, and like that vast longing and loneliness, like, or a need to escape is kind of implied by the vignettes. And I think that they're like, it's crazy how well torn this or well worn, I should say, this trope is in like literature and movies, right? How many times have we done this? You mentioned synecdoche, like it almost always is the topic of like the great American novel,
yeah.
It's
things
always
that
the
wanna be
topic.
that.
Things that want to be so big, like the fountain. You guys
Right.
remember the fucking fountain?
I do.
Remember Cloud Atlas? You guys remember Cloud
Yeah,
Atlas?
you wanted to talk about literally everything.
Any movie where
and
you're
say
like,
everything
and-
about
yeah.
everything. Yeah, the
And I
mundane
love those
and the
movies.
spectacular combined together. Yeah, and
And the ultimate truth
they work.
that it's,
it's a good trick. They work.
The ultimate truth
Sometimes.
that it's all determined by your perception. The same thing can be mundane or spectacular if you've
Yeah, it's
conquered
Bill.
your
It's
internal
Bill looking
challenges.
at his bath mat and being like, "I've never I forget the exact quote, but like, my bath mat is spectacular."
He's never
and then-
appreciated all this detail that he never noticed. He's alive.
Yeah.
He's alive. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
The world
And
is
it's
clumsy
also-
and beautiful and new, although he's been sleepwalking for God knows how long, and something's finally shaken him awake. And I think we've all had moments of that, glimpses of that state of ultimate gratitude, and that, whoa, we can actually see the atoms vibrating. Like, it's amazing that anything even exists. It's hard to inhabit that state for a long period of time in a connected way, I find.
Yeah.
It was easier
Yeah, it's hard to
as a child.
sit in that. Yeah.
It's harder as an adult. It takes more work. I do
Drugs
feel
help.
like this is a universal human experience for sure.
Fucking drugs help.
I was gonna say mushrooms for that should
LSD
help.
does
Like-
induce it. Yeah, it's true.
What I really like
Which is
about it
fine.
too, which is fine. What I really do like about it as well is the, like, whereas synecdoche or fucking Cloud Atlas does it, and there's this sense of like, it's sad, like it's a sad beautiful, which is still true about this movie. I mean, this movie is very much has sad stuff
For
going
sure.
on.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But none of the other topics, maybe Synecdoche would do this, has the line like Bill picked up his new medication, went home and masturbated for 7 hours. It's like it is willing to do kind of this, it's willing to do the surrealism truly to the point where it's like doing what surrealism to me ought to be, which is funny. It should be
and
a little
detail
fun.
oriented.
Yeah, it's absurd. Yeah.
And I don't think,
observations on mundane life.
right. And I think that like something about this, like whatever we want to call this genre of lit and movies, like the people who want to have this conversation and are even close to nailing it, and a lot of the ones that we've listed do or are very close, they're not necessarily written by comedians. This is the one that like a comedian did. Charlie Kaufman's also another example because he's a comedian as well. Both these guys do it, and I think you need a comedian. Like,
you really do, because I mean the subject matter is that it's all absurd.
It's absurd.
Like there's obviously like it's so deep and shallow at the same time. It's absurd and serious. That is existing is absurd. And if you don't at least acknowledge that in some way and have those moments, then you're not really talking about it truthfully, I guess.
Like Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, great movie, but like not done by really a comedian, not that funny, which is surprising because
this is a whimsical guy, but not necessarily a funny guy. Yeah.
I'm really good at hitting dual tones simultaneously, like haunting and funny, like bad and funny. Like Bill woke up that morning and because you're already invested in like, oh no, his memory is slipping away. Bill woke up that morning and he could no longer remember where he put the memory clinic's daily memory quizzes.
Yeah, that's great. It's the irony
amazing,
of it is
perfect.
fantastic. It's like it's not just necessary, but it makes me enjoy what I'm watching as well, because I get to take all these momentous things with these tiny mundane but also funny things, and it gives it its charm, and it makes me like, it takes, like, I think there's something to be said about taking the bitter pill like a little bit, make it go down easier. Whereas sometimes when you're just like cloud atlasing all over the place,
right? Yeah, when you're like, it's any like, self-serious things, like, well, it's not about it's not about yourself, it's about did you do it? Are you the deepest boy? All right, congratulations. But guess what else? It's silly that you made a movie. Like, what does that even mean? What are you talking about?
Fucking, you're a fool.
Except how silly it is that you're existing right now, and then make a movie about it.
Idiot.
You fucking idiot. You don't think it's silly enough.
Yeah, you do. That's right. Yeah. And I'm a funny guy.
Yeah.
No, it's true,
I am
though.
in pain.
But you kind of need to also, because like I am in pain. Exactly. Like you need to like also the absurdity of the tragic, right? Too,
right?
Because I guess I just keep coming back to like it's not as honest if you're not doing that. If it is just this very like hold on, my dog. I don't know if you hear that, but
I heard a dog.
Hi, Megs.
Come here, go to bed.
Add something to the podcast, Maggie, or we're gonna throw you out the window.
There you go. You're okay. Sorry about that. I forget what I was saying, but whatever. It's fine.
Sure, that's fine.
That's fine.
All right,
fine.
then we're done.
I think we're fine.
We did it.
We fucking did it, guys.
We did do it, and it's dense with meaning, and I hope people watch it if they haven't seen it. And I also wanted to say, since you like this, Codes, and enjoyed the Simpsons couch gag that he did, definitely check out The World of Tomorrow. It has big this vibes, and it's only like 15 minutes, I think.
Cool. I've also already started to look up where I can order the Smartest Kid fucking thing.
Yes, Jimmy Corrigan, Smartest Kid. Shit, dude. Please let me know when you actually read that. I've never had the chance to talk about it with someone, and I'd really love to.
Cool. I'm on it.
Woohoo!
Sick,
also,
dude.
What's funny
this is special.
There was actually a lawsuit because Jimmy Corrigan looks exactly like Stewie Griffin. And Chris Ware, the creator, had to get a cease and or like there was some kind of legal dust up around it, Stewie being a ripoff of Jimmy Corrigan. So look at it. Super
Interesting.
depressing story about Stewie Griffin.
Cool. I can't wait.
It's
Fucking
great.
can't wait, dude. Hell yeah.
Yay.
We did it. And
Yeah.
you guys are pretty cool. You guys are good at
Mhm.
Oh, you're cool
talking.
too. I love you guys. I like to talk about movies with you.
Love you, Cody.
Love it. So
Miss you guys.
just
I'm
love all
excited.
around.
For our off mic plans for you to ruin my wedding. It's going to be great.
I can't
Hell
wait
yeah.
to ruin
We're
it.
gonna ruin your wedding,
Still got
baby.
time. We can figure out even
Mhm.
more.
Oh,
I
there's so
think
many
there's a
things we're
more
gonna
annoying
do.
song we could.
Yeah.
Twist and Shout would suck if you heard it 100 times.
If over and
We'll
over, if
figure
you heard
out.
it more than
Yeah.
once, like
Yeah.
when you do it once, like, oh, that's fun. That got everybody dancing. Well, you already got us dancing. We don't need this again.
I
Cody,
get
you
it.
could just do
Maybe
Puddle of
shake
Mud
it up.
We're
We're
covers.
doing it.
We could do She Hates Me by Puddle of Mud.
She fucking hates me. Nice.
We could do that Kid Rock Ain't Nobody Gonna Tell Me How to Live song.
Yes. Yes.
Or the one where like the
Perfect.
chorus is just him saying "Let's go, Brandon" in the background. It's fucking awesome. It's so
Perfect for
bad.
any wedding.
Man,
Perfect
I'll
for any
admit,
wedding.
in junior high, I was super into it. Like, I would play and weep to that song. Do you remember that Kid Rock song that's kind of sad, where it's like, I've been
I'm a
sitting
cowboy, baby."
here trying to find myself.
Only God knows why.
Oh, yeah, I
Only God
remember
knows
that.
why.
Only
It's
God,
only God
knows
knows
why.
why.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would play that and tear up and be like, maybe Kid Rock's good.
Damn.
Hell yeah, you should
Damn.
check out his new stuff because he is not.
You got it.
It's not, dude. Yeah, I remember those days because that shit was on TRL.
Yeah,
Remember
it was.
TRL?
It's just
Hell
one
yeah.
of those days.
I'm a cowboy, baby.
God. No, you're not.
Good
Yeah,
shit.
he
Yeah,
is,
you're from
sure.
Detroit,
Ain't nobody gonna tell you
motherfucker.
how to live.
No.
Well,
No.
cut my life into pieces. Cody, where can people find and follow you and see more of your work?
Well, there are a few ideas, but for your last resort, you got.
God damn it.
No, I'm online. You can Google, I guess my name. I don't know. Oh, I do a show called Some More News on YouTube, and Even More News is a podcast. And that's mostly it right now. I got a band that's gonna have an album soon. And we're called The Hot Shapes, and I like it. But yeah, you know, I do stuff on the internet. You'll
Yeah,
see
that'll
it.
do it. Google those things. That's really all anyone
Yeah.
has to say anymore these days. Google
Yeah,
those things.
Google
Yeah,
this
those
phrase or
phrases.
these words. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I am so proud of you. Everything will be okay.
And I am in pain.
I'm so proud of you.
And I am in pain.
I am in pain.
Thanks, Cave. Great pick.
Great, good,
Excellent
good job,
pick.
man.
Good, great. Good. Fine.
Good.
All right.
Nice.
This has been a Small Beans endeavor. We're a bunch of pals who make podcasts, sketches, music, web series, and movies. The Beans always have new ideas percolating, so make sure to check us out at patreon.com/smallbeans. That's patreon.com/smallbeans, where you can browse all of our current and past content, see what we've got planned in the future, and learn how your support can help the small beans grow into huge, giant monster beans. If you enjoyed this content module, please like, rate, subscribe, or tell a friend about us. We love you.